So I'm joined today by Mr. Ian Kelly. Sir Ian, how are you doing?
How are you doing, my friend? It's nice to be just called by my first name again.
Yeah,
Usually getting introduced as some sort of gimmick name, so it's nice to be just Ian Kelly, and that's me here today with you.
stripped down bear.
Bear, naked as I came into the world. Well, obviously not, because nobody wants to see that. But other than that, I'm all good, my friend. Lockdown, exciting, lots to do. Um, so, yeah,
That's why
no,
we're
it's
here.
yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good. I hope you're well yourself.
Yeah, well, so tell us about what you do.
Podcasting was, where should we
Yeah,
start? Well, we have the Dynamo Podcast Network that was launched basically about a week ago, I think. Um, I've been in podcasting now for about 3 years, just touching on 3 years. Started off with a small independent show called Dynamos Dozen, where basically it was me basically working alone, interviewing, anybody that was interesting, put it that way, whether it was from friends that I felt had interesting stories that were going to entertain people. And they're actually some of the biggest downloads still to this day, which is funny. Shout out to Peter Farrell Pizza, just in shape, OTT superstar. Still one of the most downloaded episodes we've ever had. 3 hours of us just talking absolute shite, drunk. Absolute great crack. Might have been weed in there somewhere, but I don't know. It wasn't. I can't remember.
nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, went from there. We start getting some big names in. Start getting some wrestling legends in, like Bobby Fulton, Brian Blair. Bobby Fulton from the Fantastics, Brian Blair obviously from the Killer Bees. For anyone that's not familiar with Brian Blair, big pro wrestler back in the 80s, 90s, and he's also the chairman, the head of the Cauliflower Alley Club as well. So is a big deal within the wrestling world, and especially within the Legends wrestling world. But boom, yeah, it just progressed and progressed. Start getting guys from music on. Then basically, I'd like to describe Dynamos Dozen. Really, it started off as me having a background in wrestling, wanting to make something like a wrestling podcast, but I was very open to it being diverse enough that I could have, it would lend itself to anybody, similar to what you're doing,
Yeah.
Not to make it too niche, because I was a big fan of obviously Chris Jericho's podcast. I was a big fan of Stone Cold's podcast, and big fan of Joe Rogan's. I was thinking we could make it like an Irish version like that, you know what I mean? Just anybody that's interested. And that's where the dozen comes from. Ian the Dynamo Kelly was the wrestling name that I had when I wrestled. And the dozen came from, it could be a dozen different topics on any given week, So that was the whole, and it has a ring to it. Dynamo's Dozen.
It rolls off
That's
the
one
tongue.
of those. Well, that's one of those, I'm not going to lie, and this is a real cliche kind of thing, but that is literally one that came from the toilet, from sitting on the toilet going, Dynamo's Dozen. Why is that in my head? I got to go with that. And yeah, so we start getting some bigger guests as we went along. The names are endless there, and I was very privileged and lucky in a lot of ways with timing that I was able to get the guests on at the time that I did. And then when it blew up, obviously, when we had Phil Anselmo on the show, lead singer from Pantera, down, just all-around legend. And that was a huge kind of coup, and that kind of really put eyeballs on the show and the product, and it kind of it allowed me to kind of create a bit more of a relationship with some of the listeners then, because obviously when they're staying with you every single week, they're also interested sometimes in what you have to say about certain things too. So we were able to kind of talk about music, especially when you're kind of, because one week you might pull in the wrestling crowd, and the next week they hear there's a musician on. But what I found was a lot of these guys were staying on to listen to the musician as well, just because it was like, well, hell, I've got an hour on the way to work anyway, so the morning commute is boring, I may as well listen to it. And,
there's a nice connection there within the rock and wrestling. They just kind of amalgamate like that a lot of the time.
That's exactly it, and it's cool because a lot of these rock stars, if you want to call them rock stars, I know they don't like that name unless they're from the 80s and wore spandex and had their hair all puffed up. But I think a lot of these guys love wrestling as well, so there was a nice crossover too. You know, they liked actually getting asked questions about pro wrestling because a lot of them were from, most of the guys that I've interviewed were from the kind of New Orleans area, so wrestling was a big deal to those guys growing up. So they love actually chatting about something different other than their particular band, and asking them what album, what's your favorite album, what's your favorite song you've ever written. I mean, these are questions that
they've answered a million times.
Yeah, and it's probably just a boring question in general, you know what I mean? All of them. I wrote all of them, so I love them all. So yeah, that's it really. But in terms of, I know you probably wanted to talk about the network a bit more in depth later, so we'll kind of get to that later if you want. But in terms of, that's where it all started with the Dynamos Dozen show.
So I'll have to make sure that my questions are not too predictable.
Sure, yeah, hit me. I told you that. We go way back, Morris. So
if we were to go with one episode and one episode alone, your favorite episode ever of the podcast, what would it be?
Oh, now that is a tough question. And I have been asked that before, and I still find it very difficult to answer. I was asked it in a different way. I was asked if I was to recommend one episode, what would I recommend? And I was like, oh, Jesus, man, it depends on what you're interested in, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, we've had UFO guys.
Your personal favorite, then?
My personal favorite would be probably the second episode with Phil and Selmo, purely from a standpoint that I generally don't listen back to my shows a lot, other than just skim through it to make sure it's all perfect before, see if anything needs to be edited or whatnot. And that was the one that I had to pinch myself because, I was lucky enough to get Phil on once through Kyle Thomas from Exhorder, who had been on a previous episode, and we'd had a friendship online for well over a decade, up to this point. And when he got back to me, I was lying there one day on a couch. I had asked him, I said, here, I know you're friends with Phil and Selmo. You think you could put the word in, just put it out there? And he goes, yeah, I'll try anyway. And I was literally lying there on a Sunday one day before we're having to get into Monday and do the work and all that kind of boring stuff. And I got a text going, yeah, Phil's happy to do it. I was like, what? You know what I mean? I was absolutely shocked and blown away. So the first episode was good, but it's very short because it was all promoting the new album, and it had to go through a team, promotions, company and all that. But we actually, within that space of 30 minutes, we actually had an hour. He was only meant to have 25 minutes with each guest. We ended up on the phone for an hour because before I even hit the record button, we were talking about boxing and horror movies and wrestling, and he was like, shit, man, we haven't even started the fucking show. I was like, yeah, we better get into it. So the show itself was just all about the actual album. And, you'll hear at the end of that show, it's like, send me an email, because we actually, he gave me his personal email, and I was like, what the fuck is actually happening here? Do you know what I mean? This Phil and Selmo's opening a relationship with me now. And so when we got to the second show, that's probably my personal favorite, purely because we'd already had a bit of rapport. The nerves were kind of gone from me then because I kind of knew what he was about.
Yeah.
And then spending over 2 hours just talking to literally one of your childhood idols that you grew up listening to was just incredible. So I'd say that's probably my personal favorite show, either that or having Harley race on, because he was one of my all-time favorites and one of the best world champions of all time. So but yeah, I think the Phil and Selma one would be the top,
number one.
Sure. Yeah.
So you touched a little bit on the network earlier, the network that you're making at the moment. Tell us a little bit about that. Yeah,
so we the one podcast ended up, anybody that knows me, I'm quite artistic and I always have these ideas in my head and trying to make things bigger and grander, and I've got a lot, as people can tell right now, I've got a lot to say. And I like talking. That's why you're in podcasting, right? You're not in podcasting because you don't like talking. So we kind of, I was kind of thinking, because the way Dynamos Dozen was going, I was like, right, it's not so niche anymore. It is more of a pop culture podcast where we can talk about anything. What if we made a wrestling show? We had the half dozen initially. and that was doing okay, but it was still kind of very, very similar. That was the first kind of concept that I had. But then the four podmen concept came from anybody that hasn't listened to it. Check out the four podmen. It's four guys sitting around that will review either a pay-per-view and not even review it. Excuse me, we're not like Dave Meltzer's here where we're going with stars and all this nonsense. Fuck Dave Meltzer anyway. I say that on every show, as you know. I'm going to say it on your show too. I think most people agree with me at this point anyway, you know. Fuck that guy. Don't wish any ill will on him, but yeah, he talks some nonsense. So we kind of, me and Carl King from Two Tales of Woe, as you know, one of the biggest kind of metal bands in Ireland, we were always having these conversations like, actually, and I remember texting Carl one day going, here's a question, this would be a good show. Hulk Hogan, do you think he had a better run as a babyface or a better run as a heel? And like, that is a good question, you know what I mean? I was like, that's a really cool concept, you know, a show based on that. And I kind of had the idea then of like, if we had four of us, you know, four podmen, the name kind of came, I suppose, just off the back of having the four of us that I knew that we needed. And of course, mutual friend of ours, Niall Hogan from Wrestling Mania. Hit him up on Facebook and get your latest merch. They're still
for
delivering
all your Christmas needs.
Exactly, anything you need. He's like Red from the Shawshank Redemption. He's the man that knows how to get things. So. Yeah, the whole concept of the four podmen was that it was like literally it can be a show where it's four boys sitting around a table. No, not too dissimilar to us now, except we're doing it through the internet, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But sitting around, cracking a few beers, and going through moments in time. So the first show was exactly that. The first concept.
Did you all meet in person to do that?
We did the first few shows in person, exactly in Wrestling Mania in Stephen's Green, in Dublin's Fair City, and we just sat in. We had a couple of beers. We basically shot the shit. Had a conversation about it. The first few went well. One of the original third member of the four podmen, Dara O'Connor, he kind of couldn't really commit later on because it was a monthly concept initially, but I always had the idea of like, I'm gonna rope these motherfuckers in and we're gonna get them weekly eventually. You know what I mean? They don't know what's going, but me and Niall kind of knew that was the route to go eventually. We got about 10 episodes in, but doing it once a month wasn't really cutting it because we were getting really good numbers and stuff, and as you know, people's interest goes very, very quickly. People's attention span, especially in this game, when you've got a podcast about literally everything right now. I mean, there's probably a podcast about fucking flatulence somewhere, that there's that many around, you know what I mean? So it was that was a hugely successful show. And then of course we brought in the DJ Road Dog, Mr. Jason Kennedy.
No better man.
Exactly, who you know well from Nights Out.
His wrestling knowledge is fucking through the roof, like.
Yeah, it's nearly up there with mine, to be fair. It's I always think, although he'd probably say that as well, in fairness to him. No,
he is a way of putting things, though, doesn't he? The way he talks.
Jay he has an incredible wrestling knowledge, and the thing about it is, he was the guy that I wanted from day one. But I had to kind of play the waiting game with Jay because, you know, he's just one of those complex characters, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. You know what I mean? He's a real. Yeah. He's a deep thinker. He won't just jump headfirst into something. He's a very analytical thinker, you know what I mean? He'll take a step back, and there was a spot there, and I basically approached Jay about it and said, listen, check this show out and listen back and see what you think. And he kind of fell in love with the concept straight away, and I got the man that I wanted, you know what I mean? It was like that summer signing that you want, and you finally get him. Played the waiting game, and now I got him. So Jay's come in and just added a whole new dimension to it. The banter and the dynamic between all four is very, very great, and it's very organic too. So that's been a lot of fun. Excuse me. We've had we have an ASI podcast, which essentially means American Sports Ireland, where me and one of the guys talk about, American sports, NFL, hockey, basketball. Dara, off the back of that, now has an NFL show. We got the Superior comic book show on, run by Peter Hart. Peter Hart Graphics, by the way, go check them out on excuse me, on Facebook, and of course and on Instagram. You can see all the good designs. So all the cool little logos that we have are done by Peter as well. So he has his own show called the Superior Comic Show. They debuted their first episode with the network there the other day as well. So yeah, I just encourage people to go and check out the Dynamo Podcast Network on Facebook. It's
and you have a new football one as well.
Yeah, we have a new football one as well called the Upper Tier, where it's Niall is now the host. Niall is hosting that show, and myself and Peter join him, and a couple of other guests join him as well. So that's gonna hopefully grow, and hopefully we'll get more guests on down the line. I'm sure you'd love to come on and talk about Arsenal.
Maybe when they start winning a few games.
Yeah, when they start winning. I keep getting, I have this hashtag running, hashtag free Oatsel, and that people keep laughing about it. But yeah, so it's just something different for everyone. I mean, eventually I don't want to be in all of them, because it's not a vanity project for me either. It's literally all of us have equal say in it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The Dynamo Podcast Network, I think people knew Dynamos Dozen had got over pretty big, that we decided to kind of keep the name Dynamo in it in some way, shape or form, because it's kind of, I suppose, we're trying to brand it eventually.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I think the Dynamo Podcast Network, it's not the worst name I've ever heard. We probably could have come up with something better, but I think it's pretty okay.
I think
the
it's
design
grand.
is nice. Yeah. So we're open to getting podcasts on the network at all, of all different types of podcasts, and that's what I mean when I mean I'm taking a step back from some of the shows and letting the guys kind of do their thing.
There's only so much you can do.
Absolutely. It's the pandemic has allowed us to kind of do a little bit more, but you also know there's so much work that goes in with it now, from promoting it, from getting shows ready, from networking as well, which is still the biggest job of all. And yeah, but like it's so far there's been a great reaction to it, so hopefully it just keeps on going.
Really good job on the football graphics there as well, with the score predictions, and it's nicely presented.
That's all done by Peter Hart. Like I said, he makes those graphics. He puts all that stuff up. He's our little kind of whiz kid, you know what I mean? And having him on board is great, because he's our visual guy. He makes everything look really nice, and I can probably announce to you there now officially, because people have been hearing it on the podcasts for, how long, that we were going to go to YouTube. We're going to YouTube, but that is
Brilliant.
Actually official. We will be going to YouTube within the next 2 to 3 weeks anyway.
Yeah.
So,
and are you going to take all the shows to YouTube, or are you going to take a select few?
I think so. I mean, we'll probably do the snippets thing as well. I think snippets are good. Sometimes people just want to flick through a video for 4 minutes and just watch, a conversation about, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer or something like that. And
yeah.
So I think that's the way we're going to go. I think the flagship show, Dynamos Dozen, deserves to have its full show on it as its own thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we'll probably pick, depending on the conversations we have with certain guests, I think we'll kind of snippet that out as well, kind of similar to how Jim Cornette does it. The full show is there if you want to listen to the whole thing, but then you've got good segments out of it too. So I think we'll do both ways, and I think eventually, depending on each individual and what show they're running, if they want to be on YouTube or not, definitely. But that is our goal, is to kind of eventually have all the shows on YouTube. And of course, the lads can do their own Patreons and different stuff like that. I'm in the process of coming up with Patreon ideas as well, to kind of make the fans more involved and hopefully get some money for the show. Not necessarily to make us rich, but to help the show in visually. Do you know what I mean? We can get better equipment. We need to make sure that all the lads have what they need at home. Green screens. We want to make it look nice and sexy for all the sexy people listening,
Yeah. I actually ordered a green screen a couple of weeks ago as well, but I don't know if I'll use it. I'm just going to mess around with it to start with anyway.
Yeah, it's just an idea. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes I have a
Yeah.
nice little kind of display case at the back of me, and sometimes people are asking to see more of that, so I might run with that for the first little while. But everyone knows me as a collectibles guy as well, so I like showing my props. So that could be a cool way to go, also. But yeah, that's really the plan with the network. As I said, it's only in its infancy now as a network, so the possibilities are endless, to steal a very well used cliche.
So, where are Chelsea going to finish this year?
Oh, that's a good question. I like that. Let me turn
Yeah.
you know what? That's a good question. You put the heat up here, so I'm going to turn the heat
Yeah.
down. I've got my heater right in front of me. Hang on. So you can probably still hear me. I'm not going to keep ignoring you. Chelsea going
Yeah.
to come this year. I believe second place is up for grabs there, to be honest.
Yeah, I think so.
I look at second place there, and I think Man City aren't what they were. And I think it's going to actually take a lot of work to get them back to where they were, and that's not true. That's not true. Ridiculous. There's probably people going, "What the fuck are you talking about, Ian? Hear me out." There's a lot of big players in that. I mean, the team suddenly hasn't become shit overnight. They're not bad players overnight.
Yeah.
But I question with Pep Guardiola and the vision. I mean, he's had to sign another 2-year contract. Is that purely because he wants to win that Champions League?
I think
Because
so.
I personally think he's gone back to Barcelona at the end of that 2 years, because Barcelona's calling out for him, right? Yeah, I think he wants to win that Champions League. I don't think it's going to happen. It could happen with us in 2012, but I don't know. Like,
I can't see a team like them or PSG just going the whole way.
no, you see, when you look at when Chelsea did it in 2012, that was special, because that was literally a bunch of older players that had built the brand and that team over the course of almost a decade. Like, do you know what I mean?
And Di Matteo as well at the helm.
And then Di Matteo coming back at the helm. That was something that was just, Gary Neville said it, written in the stars. You know what I mean? It was just something that was there. I don't think City or PSG have that kind of. They're building it now. I mean, they're building it, and that's fair enough. And I know Chelsea didn't have a, rich history in winning Premier Leagues and all that before. But let's be fair. When I grew up watching Chelsea, I mean, we had the likes of Kerry Dixon and all play. We were always up in the kind of mid-table mark. But then, don't forget, players like Ruud Gullit, Glenn Hoddle, and Zola came in long before Abramovich and played. That's where the term "sexy football" came from, right? You know. So there was like a sleeping giant kind of thing, and City just kind of came out of nowhere. It was like, right, it's another. And City are a big club. Don't get me wrong. I mean, they're the most supported club in Manchester. United fans like to say Man City have no fans, but they do actually. They're just they're all from Manchester. But I think Chelsea realistically could finish second this year. I think we look at the start of the season. There was a couple of dodgy moments. They were still conceding goals, but then they bring Mendy in, and
big difference.
And Thiago Silva. I mean, I don't know whether I know you watch a lot of football. A lot of people have been saying this to me because I've been calling this for the last year. I've always saw world-class potential in Kurt Zouma. Always.
Yeah.
And you're starting to see that now in the last few games. He's really standing out as somebody that looks comfortable with what's around him. They all speak French, and then you've got Kante back in that DM position sitting right in front of them. So you've got Mendy, Zouma, Thiago Silva, and Kante that all speak French together as well. You know what I mean?
You've a solid keeper.
Yeah, it's like Chelsea all of a sudden have become the best defensive team in the league of the last probably 5 or 6 games. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you have Tottenham, obviously, with Mourinho going up against us this weekend, which is it's like defense versus defense.
I'm so surprised though, because Spurs are fairly expansive at the moment. They're playing nice football.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Mourinho always had this in his locker. I've been an advocate for Mourinho. Always. I'm not one of these fickle fans that's like, fuck Mourinho. I hate him. I definitely don't hate him. I hate the team that he's at.
Yeah.
But but it's a bit of a weird one for me because it's like I'm not a fan of Tottenham in any way, shape, or form. As are you?
No.
But
Or Mourinho. I don't like Mourinho, to be honest.
but
with you.
I'm very happy for Mourinho, especially with after all the shit that he had to eat over the last couple of years, and basically saying he can't manage in the modern game. I think he went away and he rebooted himself during this whole off season, and yeah, he whatever he's done something right. Like,
He was miserable in Manchester. There's no doubt about it.
wouldn't you be? I mean, no disrespect to Man United fans, but I mean that club is run backwards now completely. I mean, you look at Man United, the force that they once were. Like, I think a lot of United fans, this is going to piss a lot of them off, but listen, come at me, bro. Know your level at the moment. You haven't been a top club now for, I don't mean top club as in like a league winning club or, even top two club for how long? When's the last time they finished second even? It was about 3 or 4 years ago.
I think so,
Or would it be longer?
Didn't they finish second behind Man City, wasn't it, the last time? Was it 3 years ago, maybe?
About 3 or 4 years ago. So, but like, obviously they're a huge club in terms of financially. But now, I mean, you've got their owner, Ed Woodward, coming out saying now that they have to balance the books and all this kind of stuff. And you're going, what?
They're fucking minted.
Again, it seems like it's a stream of cash for their owners. And that's obviously the way they're going. But even at that, they have invested. I mean, to say that they haven't invested in the club, they've spent a lot of money over the last few years.
£1 billion since Ferguson left. Sorry, €1 billion.
Wow.
If you want to be exact.
And all those years, people calling us Chelsea and the Russian and this, like, it's madness. I've always said this. It's absolute madness. I mean, Solskjaer, I feel bad for, but I don't think he's the. I mean, Solskjaer is a likable guy, right? He's definitely a likable guy. I suppose it's similar with you guys with Arsenal. Do you know what I mean? It's like you've got people there that care about the club that are on the front line, but it seems like the guys at the back giving the orders don't really give a shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're throwing money in areas that isn't really needed. Like this whole director of football thing has only really come into England over the last decade or so. It was always a big thing in Italy and in France and in Spain. But generally, those directors of football were former players, so they had no idea what they were doing. These clowns now are just literally suits that don't really understand the game. Do you know what I mean? I mean, we're kind of lucky in the sense that we've had your one Marina Granovskaya, and she's pretty much on the ball when it comes to negotiating. But it's the same thing with Chelsea. There was these players getting bought and then loaned out, and it was just these players going, why? Like, I mean, Zappacosta, why? Just because he's Italian and Conte wants a right back. But now you see Peter Cech has come in there, and he's a football man and, a visionary. I mean, Mendy is Cech signing, right?
And he's back training.
And he's back training.
Yeah.
And he's registered to play, if need be. And then you've got Lampard. Look, it's just, I'm very, very lucky.
Do you think he'll get a game this year?
Do you know what? I have a feeling that he will get a game at some point this year, whether it be in a cup or
aren't he qualified now for the Champions League? Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if we threw him in for one of them games?
Threw him in for the last home game or something. Do you know what I mean? That would be cool. No, but I think Lampard's vision. I mean, people were talking about Lampard. Oh, he's too young. He's this, and people were jumping him at the start of the season. Look at them now. I mean, he's shown that he's able to adapt and change his tactics. He's willing to come out and say, I got it wrong.
Last year was a blessing in disguise for Chelsea, that transfer ban.
Yes.
It was an absolute, and it was a different side of Chelsea that we haven't seen in a very long time.
I agree, 100%. 100%.
But then when he spent a good bit of cash this summer, so I thought, right, because that cash is spent now, he's kind of putting himself under pressure.
Yeah.
That's what I thought anyway.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously the first one he was able to get away with it. I mean, let's be real. A lot of people didn't think that Chelsea were going to get top four last year.
No.
So the fact that United were actually almost teasing Chelsea over finishing above us, even though they had bought Harry Maguire for whatever amount of money it was.
80 million,
And
I think.
yeah, and we ended up with Zuma back from loan. I think we see the real winners there in that one.
Yeah.
And they had spent money. We didn't really. I know we spent on Kovacic and Pulisic, but the deals had technically already been done. So essentially, you had to go to the U pool, and you look at that U pool now. I mean, Reece James, Mason Mount. Good Lord, that goal that Callum Hudson-Odoi scored the other night. That tackle from Mason Mount to win the ball and then put him through. It was like watching young Cesc. Do you know what I mean?
Yep. Tammy Abraham, another one.
Yeah, another one. That's what I mean. It's just, it's incredible. I think the job that Lamps has done has been amazing, and I do think Chelsea now have the squad to challenge Liverpool. I definitely think we could. I think we will challenge this year. I don't think the gap is going to be as big. I think
it's a strange year. Anything can happen.
I do feel that Chelsea have the squad to go the distance, and yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we're lifting the Premier League trophy at the end of the season. But I definitely do think within the next 2 years, Chelsea will be a dominant force again, and I'm sure you probably agree with that as much as you hate to.
But do you think the same manager will be there?
Of course.
You think so?
Well, especially if he wins.
But I just think if he goes on a real barren patch, I don't know. The club has never been
historically, but opposition fans have been telling me since the day Abramovich took over the club that he was going to leave eventually and get bored. That's never happened. So that one's gone out the window. We know that the owner loves the club, even though Theresa May decided that he wasn't allowed into the country after pumping how many billions worth of tax into the country. Yeah. That's just England right now, though, right?
And giving his hotels for free to NHS as well.
There you go, yeah. Because he wasn't one of the clubs that he was continuing to pay his staff as well. Wasn't looking for any of these government handouts, when the likes of Man United and Liverpool were. Liverpool went back on it quickly when they realised the publicity behind it wasn't good for them. But at the same time, they wanted it. And that's not the fans' fault.
And Arsenal sacked their mascot.
He's
since been rehired, though.
By Ozil.
Yeah, it was never really officially confirmed, but can they really take that money off him and give it to the guy and just bring him back?
I think it's Ozil in that costume.
Good for him to have something to do, I suppose.
Yeah, well, he might be able to do a little bit more than some of them are doing at the moment. So,
they're left.
Go ahead.
They're left with a bit of egg on their face at the moment because of the whole lack of creativity thing. But I think he's past it anyway.
It's a strange one, yeah. Like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think to answer your question with the Lampard situation, I think the club are trying to go in a different direction now. I think Lampard was always going to be given 2 or 3 years anyway. I think he's definitely performing now to expectations. The team is playing well. Havertz is back from Corona now, so he's back this weekend. They're just literally for every position they have a player, in the waiting. So it's exciting times to be a Chelsea fan, but I think all football fans need to learn not to be fickle in general, because a lot of fans can just turn on their team with 2 bad results. So I hear what you're saying.
So second or first?
You want me to go out on a limb? I think this year. Do you know what? I'm actually going to say first. Yeah, I think so. I think we can take advantage of Liverpool's injury situation now at the moment. I think if we beat Tottenham, I know we're at home. We should beat Tottenham. We always beat them anyway, generally. It was called 3-point lane for a reason.
It's a shame it's not next week and the fans will be back into it.
Exactly, but I think I think a win against Tottenham this weekend is a huge statement,
Yeah.
And I think Klopp did mention that he thinks Lampard and Chelsea are going to be the team to watch next year. So he's obviously watching that and kind of going, all right, this is a very young team that isn't all just built on money now. Do you know what I mean?
It's going to be a feisty game.
Yeah, I mean, like if you look at it, like the key pieces that he's added in, Werner is just what a player. But he's a feisty player too. He doesn't mind getting kicked or anything like that. But what you've seen now is, I think what you're watching now is a core being built again. You're looking at the Lampard and Terry and Makelele and Drogba situation being built again, I haven't seen that in Chelsea since they've left. So I'm looking at the back. Zuma looks like a guy that's ready to step up now when Thiago Silva eventually does retire. Reece James just looks like captain material as well. I mean, what an absolute beast of a player! Like, he's a little demon. And then you've got Mason Mount, Kai Havertz in there. There's a lot of components there that I have to say makes me look forward as a Chelsea fan. And now I won't bore your listeners anymore with Chelsea, because I'm sure most of your listeners are like, this fucking guy.
You still have that Giroud to come off the bench and get a winner as well.
Oh, especially against Tottenham.
He'd love that.
Listen, he's sexy Giroud, you know what I mean? That's who he is. It's what he does.
I think he's the most underrated player of our generation.
I would agree with that. And if you look at the way, like, he's actually walked into that Chelsea dressing room from day one and just happy to be in a part of it, you know what I mean? He could have left this year. He knew he wasn't going to get a whole lot of game time with Tammy and Werner, but apparently he's taken the two of them under his wing, and he knows. I mean, he's happy to be there. You know what I mean? You'd know if Giroud was unhappy. Yeah. You know, you would know, and I think he's a model professional. Great player. I love him. I love Giroud.
Yeah. So to wrap things up then.
Yep.
Going towards this time next year, what's the network going to look like? What is your whole platform going to look like, say, this time next year, in your head?
In my head, we've got the ability to have Patreon and allow fans to kind of have access to different content and have the fans a little bit more not invested, but more involved in the products that we're putting out. Hope to have a lot more shows on the network as well, covering different genres, covering different different interests and hobbies and whatnot. Obviously YouTube is going to be a big thing for us. We definitely want to be on YouTube and all of the kind of video platforms, hopefully. And like I say, it's not all about making money necessarily, but it's it would be nice to kind of have this kick off and have it the way we make our living. Do you know what I mean? But by doing so, we're giving better content then to the listener. You know what I mean? So I would like to see it. I like that slow evolution, because that's the way it's happened anyway.
Yeah.
And I think we're ready now to kind of take on a lot more. Do you know what I mean? We've got a good kind of team around us. There's people that all have their strengths and their key abilities to kind of bring something that the other person can't. You know what I mean? So it's a great balance of kind of individuals and characters that we have here as well. And it'd be without the likes of Carl, without Noel, without Peter, without Ted, without Jay, without Dara, and the people that were listening to the show from day one, like yourself, like Joe Doig and all these people out there. Without them, we would be nowhere really. So I think the whole idea of the network is that we kind of see potential to make it bigger than what it is, and hopefully start getting fans involved. And obviously you and me have had discussions about that. When all this shit opens back up, we want to be able to kind of do nights where we can bring fans and get them involved and do live podcasts, you know what I mean, for a couple of hours, have kind of raffles and stuff like that. Have kind of cool nights like that, and have DJ sets in between, which is where you and Jay's strength comes in. So we can definitely make a lot of very unique nights going forward, and that's what I mean by fan interaction, I think that the possibilities are endless, and I think we can only go onwards and upwards from here,
Brilliant. Well, it was lovely chatting to you anyway, man.
You too, my brother.
And we'll be in contact again, I'm sure.
There's no doubt about that, my friend. No doubt about that.
Cheers, man.